Okay, hello, everybody. It's a little bit after 1 on April 29th, 2024, and we will call the Berkeley Unified School District Personnel Commission meeting to order. We don't have Mr. Carter, Commissioner Carter here yet. I assume he'll be coming any minute, but maybe especially because Commissioner Goldstein has informed me she needs to leave at 3:30 today. So we want to try to get through this agenda, and we can go through some of the housekeeping items first while we're waiting for Mr. Carter. So, Mr. Secretary, could you call the roll and we'll establish our quorum?
Commissioner Goldstein,
Present.
Chairman Roeder,
Here.
and as of right now, Vice Chair Carter is not here.
I think it would be maybe best to hold off for a few moments on the public comments, because if there are public comments, it's possible that Commissioner Carter would want to hear them too. So I will come back to public comments, but I think we can, how about the approval and adoption of our agenda? As I said, Commissioner Goldstein needs to leave at 3:30. If there are any items that Commissioner Goldstein thinks we should defer on, we can consider that, or we could just go through the agenda and just power through it, get as far as we can possibly get.
And maybe I'll suggest that we, kind of formally that we move public comment and we swap public comment with approval of the meeting minutes. So we have a little something to do and we'll wait for Commissioner Carter to get here.
In other words, do the approval of the meeting minutes basically right now.
Right, let's swap
Yes.
5 and 3.
Agreed. Okay,
Okay.
and that's what we will do. So first we have approval of our March 27th, 2024 regular meeting minutes. They're in our agenda, pages 2 through 4. I did not see any changes to those.
I'm okay with those also. So I move we go ahead and approve March 27, 2024 as is.
Okay, and I agree, so that passes unanimously. And then we have our meeting minutes of April 17th, 2024. That was a special call meeting. I have one thing that I noticed, but I'll go ahead, defer to Commissioner Goldstein.
We may have the same thing. I think the section that talked about the next meetings
Yes.
was just old information, and we should update that to just reflect the 4/7 or the 4/27, this meeting, number 7.
Yeah, so that would
Yeah.
be basically changing the October 25th, 2023 to April 29th, 2024 at 1 o'clock, and then deleting the last sentence.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
Okay, so I agree. Did you move or?
Yes,
Can we consider that a motion?
I would move approval of those minutes subject to the changes suggested in item 7.
I agree.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, we're still trying to work on housekeeping. Let's see. Public comments. We could, my suggestion would be to go on to consent items. That may go rather quickly, if that's all right with you, Commissioner Goldstein.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so we will formally move item 7 to now, up above item 6.
Yes.
So we have 3 eligibility lists to ratify: instructional technician, nutrition services assistant, and school safety officer. I think it would be appropriate, though, because I skipped over public comments, to get back to it when Commissioner Carter gets here, if there are any comments from either our remote public or our public here on our consent items, it would be appropriate to listen to those comments at this time. Don't see any remotely. And Sarah, if you'd help me, if you see any, please let me know. Don't see any remotely, and I don't see anyone asking to speak in the room, in the boardroom. Commissioner Goldstein, any comments, or do you want to?
No comments from me, other than it was our usual speedy interval between exams. Each one was basically 7 days. Appreciate that. No other comments from me.
Okay, is there a motion?
Sure, I motion that we go ahead and approve 7A through C eligibility lists.
Okay, and I agree with that. So those three eligibility lists are approved. Well, we may have run out of housekeeping.
Mhm.
So I would suggest we go to public comments.
Chairman Ritter,
Yes.
I just got an update from Vice Chair Carter. He says he's 10 minutes away.
Okay, well, let's see what we can do here. We'll go to public comments. So this is the time for anyone either in the room or on Zoom remotely to make a public comment. We have a 15-minute total time limit and 5 minutes per individual comment, and there is a public comment period at the very end of our meeting as well. Anybody want to make a public comment at this time? If anybody who is here remotely wants to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you. Not seeing anyone remotely raising their virtual hand. How about in our audience? Does anybody wish to make a public comment? No public comment in the audience either. So we will close the public comments in that case and move on to our reports, beginning with our union report.
So I can.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. You're
Wait, sorry.
recognized.
Okay, this is gonna be really quick. We want to respect Commissioner Goldstein's time. So I just want to briefly discuss or just bring to your attention our concern with the nutritional service assistants, satellite operators, and cooks job description, but more importantly, the compensation piece. It is good to see that we have 4 people on the open list. However, what we would like to see is an upgrade in the compensation piece of the satellite operators, the nutritional services, and the cooks. But then looking over the compensation, they're the lowest paying classification in BUSD, and they do so much for our children. And in looking at the compensation, if you look at a step 1, the step 5 of an NSA, they make more than a step 1 of a satellite operator. So it's just, it's a concern in how the compensation piece is, but most importantly, through all of this, we've come to find out that this program within itself has their own budget. So we understand that we're going through layoffs and there's a lot of things going on. However, the district cannot touch the money of nutritional services. It is strictly their own money. So in speaking with their supervisor, who is very much in support of looking to raise the compensation piece of the department, because not only is it hard to retain, it's hard to, hire for those classifications. So I'm just bringing this to your attention because I want you to understand again that they have their own budget. So it'd be easy for us to look into the compensation of those classifications. And maybe the next meeting, we can talk about an action item or, talk to Charlie about reclassing because, this is something that really needs to be looked at. And I would like to see it looked at prior to their supervisor retiring in June. If we can make something happen for these classifications. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scher. I won't make any comment. Now, we'll move on to the district report. I think I saw Assistant Superintendent Samantha Tobias Espinoza on remotely. I don't know, I don't see her hand up. Don't know if she would like to make a report at this time. Yes, your hand is up. Go ahead, Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinoza.
Thank you, Commissioners. So I wanted to let the Commissioners know that this Wednesday, we will be taking a revised version of the layoffs to the board. And it is a much shorter list than it was. It's not short, meaning that it's not completely gone, but we have been able to rescind some of the layoffs, and we're hoping to continue rescinding and even have an even shorter list of people who actually get truly laid off. But we are up against a timeline. Per Ed Code, we have to do a final notification by May 14th for layoffs. And so we are taking it back to the board this Wednesday. There are two options that are on the board because there's a board item right before it that will impact whether or not certain positions stay on the list. So we're hoping that that we will be going with the version that has the least number of positions. I also wanted to share that at the next board meeting on Wednesday, we have both BCCE and Local 21's sunshines for their BCCE's full contract and Local 21 for reopeners being presented for the first read. They will go back to the next board meeting after this, which I believe is May 22nd. And then we will be in the negotiation cycle. So I just wanted the Commissioners to have that update.
Okay, thank you very much, Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinoza, for that update and the update regarding the potential budget and layoffs is indeed very good news, and I hope it continues in that direction. So we have now been joined by Commissioner Carter. And as you may have been told, Commissioner Goldstein needs to leave at 3:30. So we're trying to go through as many of the items on our agenda as we can. In your absence, we did go through some of the more housekeeping, more routine type of items. And we did have the unions report, and we just finished the district report. So now it's commissioners' reports. I will not make a report given the interest of time, but our other commissioners, Vice Chairperson Carter, any report to give?
I have no reports
No.
to give.
Commissioner Goldstein?
I'll just make a very brief comment because this will happen before our May meeting. On the 24th, Thursday, the 24th of May, is the classified service recognition event, which I'm really looking forward to. And it is just remarkable to me, the number of people who are on that list who have stayed with Berkeley Unified, 20 years and beyond. So every once in a while, it is just a good reminder, we do some things right. There are things that are desirable about working in this district. People vote with their feet when that's not the case. And it was just really nice to see, and I'm looking forward to attending.
Great. Yeah, I fully concur. Personnel Director.
Thank you. I too will keep my comments short, just, I'll try to be as brief as possible. You'll notice the exam report. Usually I give a fairly extensive, list of exams that have been done, but this year, we held back on recruiting and, given the potential, of bumping, we didn't want to move forward with a lot of our original recruitment. So the exams total this month was, historically low at 43 for good reason. 25 of those were training and experience. 6 were written, 7 were oral, and 5 were performance related. We had 2 new hires. And I'm only going to report out on 2 items. One is layoffs and the other is on the classification and compensation study. So for layoffs, I'm very happy to hear from my colleagues that at the district that we may be averting a lot of these, if not most of the layoffs, which is great. I will tell you, I did send a note to Pauline Follensby, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, and to Emily Mayer, our Director of Finance, to commend them because they did not fall back on looking at staff reductions as the only solution. As a matter of fact, I thought they got very creative. They spent a lot of time in trying to avoid those effects on the employees, and I did send an appreciation note to them. And I again, I want to commend them on public record because I'm sure it took a lot of work, and I know the employees are very appreciative for that. In terms of the classification and compensation study, the good news is that we've re-engaged with EHA. Their senior leadership has insisted on cooperating. They want to salvage what they can from the report, and they've rebooted and assessed the entire report, sent us an updated report, and there's still some changes and modifications that need to be made. It's not complete, but I hope to have something complete in my hands in the next week or so. At that time, I'll share it with the steering committee, with the unions, and with firstly with the district. So hopefully by June, my goal is to have a report for the commission to review, which will include phase 3 and phase 4. And my hope is that it include a final report. But what I've looked at from phase 4, they do have salary recommendations. They do have updates on some of the job titles. And it's fairly comprehensive. I think it's something that we can use and definitely evaluate. So I hope to have that for you in June. Other than that, I think if anybody's listening, I want to thank everyone at the district for being working with us so closely and for being so compassionate and delivering not so great news to employees and being very responsive. And I know the feedback I've received back from employees is that they were very appreciative for that. So I could report back that it was a group effort, and it was positive in the face of what may have been some very negative news. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Let's see. And you discussed the class and comp study. We went through our consent items already. So now we are at item 8A, which is the step advance request for A Segura. That's attachment A, pages 11 through 25. Mr. Castillo, could you present this for us, please?
Thank you, Chairman Roeder. We do have a few of these requests, and I will try to be brief but informative as possible. Mr. Segura is in the IA2 SPED class, which we all know is a very high need recruitment area. Mr. Segura has the AA degree, and he has the 6 years of experience. I think that definitely qualifies him for the for the step 5 that he is requesting. And I definitely, given the job class, given how difficult it is to fill and that he has the experience, I am supporting his request for step 5.
Okay, thank you. I see that Mr. Segura is has joined us remotely. So if he would like to make any comments on the step request, this would be the time to do so. If you would raise your virtual hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the vote of confidence, for giving me this step. I'll definitely help out the Berkeley Unified School District, and rest assured that, I know what I'm doing. I have a lot of experience with all types of kids, from pre-K to high school, so I won't let you guys down.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Segura. Appreciate that. I'll call on our commissioners now. Any comments or questions?
I'll just comment. It looks like actually he has two ABs, or AAs, one in general business and one in language studies. So, all the more support.
Mr. Carter?
I do have a question. How does the step 5 relate to the class and comp if this classification sees a increase? Would this freeze him there at step 5, or would this also move him to a new level if step 5 gets moved up?
Thank you for the question. I think this is separate from that process. I think that the recommendation being made by EHA is for the entirety of the job grade for that class. So let's say, for instance, he's at 5, he'll be at 5 at the new one. It won't, like, we won't freeze him to whatever the equivalent would be. So that, I treat that as separate. Like, there's going to be a recommendation coming from EHA. There's going to be discussions and meeting confers with the unions, and they're going to land somewhere with that, but it doesn't, we won't freeze him. It'll move with him, whatever that new salary range will be.
And my last question, or maybe it's a comment. I did hear you mention his background, and I understand this one has gone through the same or similar matrix as the ones prior to your recommendation, and you came after you went through the matrix. This is what you came up with at step 5. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carter. I have one question. So on page 12 is the advanced step placement request. I see that hire date is left blank. In the past, that has been left blank if the individual has not been hired yet and is waiting for a determination about the step increase. And I just want to confirm or ask if that's true this time too.
I believe I looked because I didn't know if he'd been hired last week, but that's still the case. Yes.
Still the case. Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. If there are none, is there a motion?
A motion to approve?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the advanced step placement for Alan Segura to step 5, and I agree with that as well. And so it passes unanimously. All right, we will now move to item 8B, which is the step advance request. Not sure I have the correct pronunciation, and I apologize in advance. Une?
I have it as Prita Pepsi Une.
Une. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Castillo.
Thank you, Chairman Roder. It's debatable as to whether special ed or school bus drivers are actually the most difficult. And I think in some regards, school bus drivers tend to be extremely difficult to find. And you go across the state, and in talking to my colleagues, it's always sped and school bus drivers. So there's not going to be any argument that the school bus drivers are extremely difficult to recruit for. And on that note, Pepsi comes with 7 years of experience. They put down 7. I'm not going to quibble, but I think it's more closer, probably closer to 6. However, using the matrix, 6 years versus 5 years, given that it definitely meets our recruitment need for school bus drivers. I also support this at a step 5.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I don't believe Ms. Une is present. Is there anyone who wants to speak on behalf of Ms. Une on this point? Don't see anybody right now. So to our commissioners, any comments from our commissioners?
I have 2 questions. One is just to understand, is school bus driver a 1.0 FTE position or no? Yes, I'm seeing a
I think
nod.
it is.
Mhm.
It is.
Yeah. The other is I want to know if she has friends who are school bus drivers. She can refer.
Yeah, friends and family.
Yeah.
please, Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all.
Ms. Goldstein. Mr. Carter, any comment?
Just a comment, it's just repeating it. They went through the same matrix as the other applicants to come up with this determination, step 5. You put them through the same determination. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have just one comment, which is going to get more relevant, I think, in the next few requests. But in this one, as we all know, the step advance placement is for new hires. And we've been told that in recent years, we have considered as long as 6 months to still be considered a new hire, which seems like that's on the outside of being called a new hire, but that has been our practice unless we change it. And I see that this one does show Ms. Une as having an October 6, 2023 hire date. And the date of her letter, one turns the page, is March 25th, 2024. She came in just under the wire. By my reckoning, April 6th would have been 6 months. And her letter is dated March 25th. I think, although we haven't determined this, I think that the date of the letter is the relevant time period to consider as opposed to the date of this meeting, because that's flexible.
Forgive me, small point of correction. Pepsi's a male.
Oh, sorry. Very sorry. So I don't see any reason why, from a timing standpoint, he could not be approved. And I'm in favor of, I think he's very well qualified as well. I would be interested, and he isn't here, so maybe we don't know why such a long delay, almost 6 months. And I think that's really problematic, that for whatever reason it might be, if employees wait a full 6 months to apply for a step increase after they're hired, that's a problem. I'm not blaming the employee, but I am concerned about our process, and we have talked about this in the past. So that's just a comment. The question's been answered. If there aren't any other comments from anyone, yes, Mr. Carter.
I just want to say I appreciate you pointing out the 6-month window that our past practice has been 6 months. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll
Ms. Goldstein.
just add, what we've heard from employees is that in the hiring process, there's no explicit explanation, certainly not from the district, the employer, that if you want to petition, for a higher rate, you need to do that timely. I know we've talked back and forth from time to time about whether the union makes that clear to their members, and I'm not sure what the interval is. in someone hiring on and actually getting on your rolls as a union member, and if that's part of the, the delay. But I think reasonably, we can expect the employer is not going to do that coaching up front. And that if folks are going to get that coaching, it's going to be because their union does it for them. So, 6 months is a healthy interval, but given our circumstances, I think it's a fair interval.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Goldstein. Okay, well, I will go ahead and move approval of Prita Une's advanced step placement request
I'll
to
second.
step 5. It's been seconded. Mr. Carter, do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, so
I agree.
that passes unanimously as well. Okay. We will now move on to the item 8C, which is the step advance request by G. Martinez. Mr. Castillo, could you present that one, please?
Yeah, so for the request for Grace Martinez, it is also a request for an instructional special assistant, instructional assistant special ed 2. I had to do a slightly deeper dive into Ms. Martinez's experience because it's not a 1-for-1. She was not a paraprofessional in the previous jobs. So looking at the education and the experience in those jobs, there's definitely a nexus. I did not count kitchen assistant, private nanny, or nanny. However, between the program coordinator for Contra Costa and the registered behavior technician, there's enough work in that work to be one-on-one work, which we do have although we're inclusion, we do have some of that work for the severe and some of the areas in special ed. I think that the experience does matter in terms of the years of experience that she has. So I'm counting it and I'm advocating for it. Not only because it's an area of high need, but the areas of special ed in terms of behavioral therapists, and special needs and some of the emotional experience for those areas, we do need desperately in Berkeley. So I'm also recommending the step 5 for Ms. Martinez's request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. I am looking to see whether remotely Ms. Martinez is on. I don't see her. Sarah, do you see her? I don't. Oh, GM, of course. Yes, well, if I bet GM is Grace Martinez. So if Ms. Martinez would like to address the Personnel Commission on her advanced statement placement request, this would be the time to do so. If you could raise your hand and unmute.
Hello, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you.
I just want to reach out on behalf of the site that I'm at for Oxford. Just with the short staff that we have there, we all stick together and work together in the special ed department, and it's just been a pleasure working there. And with the needs that more and more kids need every day, I feel like I would be a great asset to helping with the ABA experience I do have. And yeah, just working with the kids and making a difference.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martinez. I do have a question. And first, a comment. I think Ms. Martinez, I agree with our executive director that she is extremely well qualified. And I notice on page 41, we have a very exemplary, very complimentary letter of recommendation from Jaime Vines, second grade teacher at Oxford Elementary. My question, so for better or for worse, I'm kind of a stickler on procedure. So Ms. Martinez appears to have been hired October 1st, 2024. October 1st, 2024. Okay, that's the first question.
So in the escape system, I see it as October 16th, 2023.
Should be 2023.
Yes.
That's sort of what I assumed. Didn't notice the 24th. So if again, my calculations are correct, that 6-month period of time that we've been using would expire on April 1st. And given the date of Ms. Martinez's letter, which is April 17th, she would be a couple of weeks too late to fall under this step advance request. However, I also notice that the letter that we were talking about from Jaime Vines is dated April 10th. So clearly, Ms. Martinez was involved in this process prior to the date of her letter, April 17th, and maybe even before April 10th. So I have one question. If Ms. Martinez is still, yes, is still on. One question is, why did it take for you about 6 months to apply for a step advance? And can you shed any light on these various dates in April?
Yes, so when I was hired, I second what the other woman mentioned. We're not known to have the option of doing this. So another coworker of mine did it and told me, you know, this is an option, reach out, get all the information. I believe I started this process at the end of March. So it's just been a process of getting the letter of recommendation, getting all my paperwork together. But I know that the woman I reached out to, the assistant of Mr. Costello, did mention if you're going to do this, you're at your 6-month period, you know, you have to do it or you don't have another chance. So it's partial not having the information right away and just getting everything together. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Martinez. We appreciate it. Comments from our commissioners?
I'd like to double check something I thought I heard Sarah say. The escape hire date, did you say was the 16th?
That's what I see. Yes.
10/16.
Oh, 16.
Okay. And because there is also a break in April and we're talking about one day, I would be inclined to propose that we provide a grace period of a day to entertain this within the interval.
Any thoughts, Mr. Carter?
I would also consider the one day as an exception. With a comment that I think it's a slippery slope, 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, 4 days, everyone's request is substantial to them. You know, when they are requesting it, why not a week, a month or two? But in this case, since she has seemed to start the process prior to her date, which she would have to get the letter of recommendation, I'm inclined to agree because she definitely qualifies for the increase. So I would tend to agree as well with Commissioner Goldstein.
May I also ask, I noticed in the package, there was a transcript for high school. I didn't see one for the AA degree, and I just want to understand from our director that he's seen that, our executive director.
Yeah. I was
sir. So I was counting the years of experience with the behavioral training course on page 45. And also the first aid and also the what's it called here? The nannies tutors, which has, when I looked on their website, had the some of the behavioral components that I thought did provide a nexus with some of the things that she would be doing in this role. But I only evaluated what she submitted. I did not ask for college transcripts. I used, my recommendation is based on what I have before you.
So given that, I would suggest that we actually wait on this one. I'd like to see the documentation for the AA, just as a matter of diligence, as we always do. And because we are proxying in other experience, rather than, very clearly portable, worked in a different school district, did the same job
Yeah.
kind of experience. I think certainly above step 1 is appropriate. I'm not sure step 5 is appropriate. The AA is a medical assistant on the resume. And that actually can have a fair amount of relevance, to kids, special ed students. I don't think I have all the information. So I would actually move that, we grandfather, that we consider, this request has been made timely, but I would like to make sure that we have all the rest of the information before we act.
Carter?
My questions to you, Charlie. Would the additional information change your recommendation if we were to? Because your recommendation is based on what you have, right? And you use the same matrix for this employee as you have for the prior two. Right?
Yes, I believe what she submitted and her year's experience was enough. So to me, it would be additive, but I understand the request. We can request that from her.
I guess one question that I would have is, so our next meeting is approximately a month from now. And I also respect Commissioner Goldstein's request for the additional information that it would be relevant. But let's say that we did, so stepping back 1 second, generally speaking, the step advance is effective right after the commission approves it. If we were to agree with a step advance, whatever step it might be precisely, and given the fact that this request was on our agenda at this meeting, and I think this is going to be a question for Mr. Castillo, which he may or may not be able to answer, could our approval, assuming there is one, be retroactive to this meeting so that she doesn't lose out on a month's step increase?
Actually, may I speak before you do? So when somebody makes the request, they fill out an advanced placement request form. So I'm looking at the form. And we list the items that should be included with the request. And I see that these items are ticked off here, including a resume, a diploma, transcripts, and certifications. All right, the reason I'm asking for the AA degree is because I want to make sure it was completed. Okay, because it was omitted, but yet by this, it looks like, the whole thing was checked off. That's what diligence is in this case. My recommendation would be that we are clear in what we need to make our evaluation. We don't have what we need to make our evaluation. And that if we make our evaluation at the next meeting, you know, because we have the full set of information, that's when it becomes effective.
Okay, and we don't have to decide that at this meeting
Right.
anyway.
Mhm.
Well, I'm willing to support Ms. Goldstein's request that we defer a decision on this and place it on the agenda of our next meeting and
Mhm.
get the additional transcript information that we need.
I have no problem with more information.
Well, I'll make my comment in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Sure.
I second.
Oh, I think Ms. Goldstein beat you to it, Mr. Carter. So it's been moved and seconded, and I think Mr. Carter
concur.
agrees. So we will defer action on the step advance request for Ms. Martinez until our next meeting. Okay, and our last step advance request is for Mr. Padilla, item 8D, and that starts on page 49, I believe. Mr. Castillo, will you present that item?
Yes, thank you. So Mr. Padilla, is requesting step 5 as a maintenance engineer. Mr. Padilla is the only person on the list. I wanted to make sure that what was the distinguishing characteristic for Mr. Padilla that would, really qualify to justify the, advanced step. And in talking to some of the folks in maintenance, I think that what I'm hearing is plumbing and the clean out and is an area of need definitely for the district. He also has the HVAC, the water heaters. He covers a lot of areas and he has a lot of areas of expertise in areas that we need in maintenance. Given his years of experience, if you'll note, he definitely has the years of experience. It's to me, I think the backflow prevention technician, I always find it fascinating too, because I research these things to see what they mean. So it is a specialization in what is like the extracting and the plumbing process. I won't go into too much detail, but he definitely has that experience. I think that if you'll note in his background, he actually worked in the apartments, West Village Apartments. The relevance to that is I think that when there's multiple stories and buildings, that's even more difficult. So I find that with his background and experience, I would take an educated guess that there's very little in his background that he has not seen, and that would definitely help BUSD a great deal. So given his experience, and he does not have the public K-12 in the traditional sense, but given his background, he has worked at a university, although it's not K-12. And given that he has those areas of expertise that we need in the district, I'm supporting his request for that reason at step 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Let's see. So first I will take a look to see. I don't think that Mr. Padilla is with us remotely. Do you see him, Sarah? And so I will ask, it looks like perhaps Mr. Hernandez might want to make a comment on behalf of Mr. Padilla. Go ahead, Mr. Hernandez.
Yeah, I just want to comment that I hope you consider his step 5, or increase to step 5. I am on the same crew as Padilla. We work together at nights, and he has filled a huge void on our crew. He does things since I've been here 9 years that no one else on our crew can do, which results in bringing in contractors. So he's helped getting rid of the contractors, which, you know, we want in the district. It costs them less to pay a maintenance engineer than contract it out every time they have that issue. And that's a big issue. It's been going on for years. So I hope you consider giving him the increase to step 5. The other thing I would love to say on this is that position over the last few years has really been hard to fill. I mean, really, he's the only one on the list, like Charlie said. The list before that, there was only one person who went through the whole process. And my understanding was when it came down to accepting the job, they did the interview and everything. He said, sorry, I'm going somewhere else. He was the only that person was the only person on that list. Before that, I believe there was 3, which we hired 2. The other person they offered the job to, they turned it down. They hired 2, and now those 2, one person left about a year later for, another place because, well, we know why. So in the last couple of years, we've had 1 maintenance engineer hired, and then Padilla is the second one. So it's a hard to fill position is what I'm getting at. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate your comments very much. Let's see, comments from our commissioners.
Yeah, I just want to say, Frank, I appreciate that comment. That goes a long way. That carries more weight with me than the educational background, given our need for the district. So, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, Ms. Goldstein.
So this is one I agree as well. I was unclear about the date of hire. This was one that I also just flagged to try to understand what the date of hire was. Thank you.
I see it as December 11th, 2023.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And that's well within our 6-month period.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to make a motion to go ahead and grant this step placement at step 5.
And I'll agree with that. I second that motion and agree with it.
A third.
And Mr. Carter does as well. So Mr. Padilla, his step advance request to step 5 has been approved. And that takes care of our step advance requests. Now we're on to item 8E, which is Assembly Bill 2088. And to consider whether the Personnel Commission of the Berkeley Unified School District wishes to join a group of other districts and organizations that are in opposition to AB 2088. AB 2088, as I think we are aware, is a bill that has most of the same features as AB, help me again, 1699?
Yes.
1699 from last year, which was vetoed by the governor, although it did pass the Assembly and the Senate. So we had this on our agenda at the last meeting, but felt we needed more time to actually read the bill and to study the various points back and forth. So now we are here to decide whether we wish to join the coalition against it or not. And we have both persons remotely, possibly, and in the audience. And if my vision is correct, I think we're joined and honored to have Board of Education Director Jennifer Sinoski with us. I don't know if she wants to talk about this particular item, but if she does, she's welcome to do so. But I'll leave it to the union officials and Ms. Sinoski. Go ahead. Thank you.
I don't know if this is on. I've never used it from this side. Thank you. I'm actually here in my capacity as a teacher and also a member of the Executive Council of the California Federation of Teachers. So it's my understanding that the Personnel Commission is supposed to be a neutral body on matters like this. And so it was a little troubling for me to see that the Personnel Commission is considering taking a position on something that is certainly a priority bill for the California Federation of Teachers, of which two of the employee unions within BUSD are affiliated. This is a bill, Commissioner Goldstein mentioned how grateful we are to keep our classified professionals within the district and have, for many years, and we celebrate that. And this is a bill that will promote the possibility of folks moving up. If you look at the list of signatories that are opposing this bill, they are mostly administrative positions. And so I would encourage the Personnel Commission to remain a neutral body and not take a position either for or against this bill. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address this bill?
Hello, everyone again. Yeah, I had the same question as why would we being opposed, or why are we opposing this bill? I guess is the question, or why it's even here. I just want to say that the CFT, the California School Employees Association, and SEIU are all co-sponsors of this bill. CFT is our mother local, as is the BFT. It's their, we're all in the same union. So CFT is sponsoring this bill. This bill has support from unions. I just want to say that it's obvious. And like the list that you have that was brought up in the documents, I don't think there's any unions on that list. Those are all admins, districts, and so on. There was a couple concerns I had last week, and by reading this, it says that anybody could apply for the position, and that seems to be a problem. The narrative that I was hearing was very negative. That's not how I read it. You could apply if you meet the minimum requirements, which was also brought up last week, which I thought was kind of odd that it was made to sound like the minimum requirements were set very low. So I went online today and actually looked at, I think there's 7 or 8 job descriptions or jobs out there, openings. And I wanted to see if I could meet the minimum requirements. And the answer is no, I couldn't meet any of them. So what I'm getting at is, yeah, minimum requirements, that's in any job. So that doesn't mean that I could go and be a IA or another position that I'm not qualified for. I would have to qualify for that position. So I think the minimum requirements are good. I think based on seniority in those job classifications is good. I think it serves its purpose. I think that there's not a perfect system, and we will never find a perfect system. But I've said this many times here, in many other places, that I believe in seniority. Seniority should override everything. And I think this bill is a step in that direction, that we hire, and we could hire by seniority. I think it would help classified. I think it would help the hiring process. I think we could get more people in. I think it would, like I said last week, pave that road so people know where they're going when they're trying to get promoted. And I think that would help bring more people in. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Now I think, we have, at the last meeting, we had a bit of a discussion about this bill. So Mr. Castillo, did you either want to make any additional comments, or, as I recall, at the last meeting, you did indicate that perhaps one of a representative from the CSPCA, the California Personnel Commissioners Association, might want to address us, and I don't know if that's on the agenda or not.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have any of them attend today, but I did speak to them, and again, this is bringing you forward the information. That there are strong reservations, and that there are commission districts that are signing this because they believe that it undermines the spirit of the merit system. but I was not able to secure them to speak today. It's a tough time slot, but perhaps maybe for June, if you still want to consider, I might be able to ask one of them to come as well. So you can hear both sides.
Commissioners, Commissioner Goldstein.
I'm just wondering, are we sure there's nobody online who wants to speak for it? Do
We're
we-
not sure. Put my reading glasses on.
Okay.
I don't see any hands up. No, I don't see anyone. Sarah, do you see anybody? No, I
Oh,
don't
okay.
think so.
All right. I actually, Commissioner Carter was, I think, least familiar with legislation, and I'm hoping you've had a chance to read it and would like to hear your thoughts.
So I had a chance to read through the legislation briefly. My stance was more that we should, whether we should or should not voice our opinion on the legislation in general. The wording of it does lead me to believe that the Personnel Commission would lose lose a little bit of its purpose and its focus. It would take the direction and how we do things out of our hands in this district. The way I read the way I read the bill to be worded, it would take more of our control out and give it to the state. And I wasn't sure, I'm not very comfortable with that idea, because Berkeley has a unique way of doing things and it should stay that way. But again, on the other side is, and I'd like to hear from you guys, is what should our stance be, if any at all? I don't necessarily think this legislation is needed in Berkeley. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Anything?
Sure,
comment?
I'll always take an invitation. So I'll do that. So when we signed on to be commissioners here, one of the things we promised to do was, uphold the gestalt of the Merit Commission, which I think is part of what you're talking about. And for me, upholding the charter of the Merit Commission says that we balance a lot of different and competing interests to, in the end service of bringing the best possible pool of labor here to BUSD to serve our students. So rewarding seniority is a good thing. It's not the only thing in that range of consideration. Unlike teacher and executive council member Shinosky, who is here in those roles, I disagree. I think that personnel commissions don't need to remain neutral here. And I see in the list of signatories, actually, that some commissions have signed on. And I think it's because we hold that responsibility in that charter, and that's why they've signed on. So, it's a tough one. You want to promote talent from within. I think we try hard to do that. There are always better ways to do it. I think the flip side of this legislation is that operationally, it's a real train wreck to try to do it this way. And that's why the governor vetoed it last time when it came through as 1699. I don't see those changes this time. I expect the governor would veto it again for the same reasons, because I think that was a big reason that wasn't fixed in this new rendition of the bill. So, in some ways we can sign on, we cannot sign on. I think the governor will ultimately do it. But, I would like to be clear that I don't support it because operationally it's handing us chaos. And I don't think we need any more chaos.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldstein. My comments, in no particular order, I think, are: one is that I think that we do, and I think for a very good reason, we do try to make our minimum qualifications actually be minimum qualifications, that I think I've read a number of studies, and Mr. Castillo's been kind enough to provide me with some materials that say that for purposes of exams and things of that nature, that the minimum qualifications are for an individual who could really minimally, maybe even only barely, perform the essential functions of the job. And no question, and I respect Frank's having looked at 6 or so of these minimum qualifications. And there's no question that you can't, one classification or an employee within one classification that is completely different from another classification probably would not meet those minimum qualifications. But there are some that have, I think even, well, there are some that have overlap and that are closer than those that are, really far apart. And one of the reasons I support having minimum qualifications, keeping them relatively low, is for the interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That we don't want to, we talk about this a lot, we don't want to set up artificial barriers to people working at BUSD. We want to open the pool of applicants as wide as we possibly can. And then we go through the examination process, both written and oral, and performance, and interviews, and all of that. And then we find the best candidates to fill the jobs. But it's quite possible that somebody who, and I know I've said this in the past, somebody who doesn't necessarily on paper in their application look like they're going to be the very best candidate may actually be the very best candidate for other reasons based on life experience and other kinds of things. So I think minimum qualifications are a good thing. I do take seriously Director Shinosky and the unions and Mr. Carter's points about neutrality. I'm not sure that we have to be neutral in a matter that directly affects the operations of the commission, which I think this bill would affect. I came into this meeting thinking, and I'm going to say that as far as my vote is concerned, I would want to be sure, as I said this last time, to be sure that we really do need to join this opposition, that it's really the right thing to do. Because it's totally optional. This is not something that is in our rules or, any, we didn't join it the last time and the governor vetoed it. So, I'm not sure that our joining or not joining is going to make or break the situation. So it's completely optional. And if one of my co-commissioners felt that for whatever reason, we should not be joining this opposition, then I would respect that. And I still feel that way. My own personal opinion is still, and as a commissioner, that I would not be in favor if this bill passed. I agree for the reasons that Commissioner Goldstein has at this meeting and the last meeting voiced. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
And I just want to add one thing that I want to make sure we're clear. We'd uphold the law if it's passed by no, there's no question about that. We're not questioning that action at all. It's just the point of view whether or not we should let the voice of our commission be heard. But if it were to pass, we would definitely uphold it and enforce it here in the district without a question.
Absolutely.
Maybe one last comment I'll make with respect to why I think it is important actually to go on the record. on this one. If you're familiar with the concept of a two-year bill in the California legislature, sometimes it gets queued up the first year and everybody knows it's not perfect and it may just take longer than one session to work it through. So this is a two-year bill, with that intention. And, what's important about a two-year bill is it says that whoever's backing it is serious, and they want it and, they have reasons and I get that. But it's also important that if you don't think it's the right thing to do, to show up each time the thing comes up, to make clear where you stand on it. So our association, the California School Personnel Commissioner Association, it's a mouthful, in some ways represents us on this. I don't intend for my opposition to this to be a signal to our unions that I don't support moving people forward. What I do support is making sure we build the best possible labor pool in the interest of the students. And promoting seniority is part of that, but it is not all of that. And that's why I think it's important that we show up on this one.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't know if we have any other comments. If not, it would be, I guess, time for a motion if there is one.
I'll motion that we sign on to this letter as it exists.
Is there a second?
I will second that we sign on.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we sign on to this bill opposing AB 2088. Mr. Castillo, could you call the roll on a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Roeder,
I'm going to pass at this time. Please come back to me.
Chairman, Vice Chair Carter,
I motion to approve.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Aye.
It's 2-1.
I vote yes.
So the vote passes.
Yes, the vote passes unanimously.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay, now we're on item 8F, which is the Administrative Assistant ECE reclassification request. And that starts, I believe, on page 67. Not sure what the best order is, but we have been dealing with this issue for quite some time. So perhaps this was requested by BCCE. So I think it would be appropriate for BCCE to go ahead and state their request.
Thank you. So I appreciate you acknowledging that we have been coming back to this since 2022, started around April. The process has started around April, and then we had a meeting in October where 2 of the 4 school ECE were reclassed upward. And then we came back and had another meeting on December 15th of 2022. We brought it to your attention, Merit Rules 30.300.4, where we stated that we as an organization violated the merit rules by not bringing upward all 4 in the school administrative ECE job classification. So we're asking that we adhere to the merit rules as well as to Ed Code and bring all 4 positions that were in that classification to administrative assistants 2, as the other 2 were brought to that classification. So once again, we have 30.300.4 B2, which states, when a portion of the positions in a class are reclassified upward, those incumbents with 3 or more years service in one or more of the positions being reclassified shall be reclassified with their position. And shall means to put forth. And then what supports it as is the ed code, which reads, when all the positions in a class are reclassified to a higher class, the incumbents of the positions who have been in the class for 2 or more years may be reclassified with their positions by the Personnel Commission. When a portion of the positions within a class are reclassified to a higher class, an incumbent who has a continuous employment record of 2 or more years in one or more of the positions being reclassified may be reclassified with his or her positions as provided by Personnel Commission rule. But our Personnel Commission rule states shall and doesn't state may. So we're asking I know we talked about it. I have all the minutes and everything when we discussed it in December of 2022. And we're just asking to bring closure to this situation and do the right thing by reclassing all in that classification and not just 2 out of the 4, because all of them do the same duties, even portion of the duties. So they all should have been reclassed at the same time to the same classification and not breaking up the classification. You want to add?
No.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sheriff, very much.
thank you.
I just want to make a comment that it's 2:16 now. We have till 3:30, which should be sufficient time to get through our agenda. We do have the public hearing on our budget, which is very critical. So let's be cognizant of the time. Mr. Castillo, did you want to, I know you've made your comments on this on many occasions, and we're all quite familiar, maybe Mr. Carter a little bit less so since he wasn't present all the time. But do you have any additional comments you'd like to make on this?
No, I mean, I think now it's a matter of the commission to consider our rules versus the ed code, may and shall. I will only say, just to give you some background, so there were 4 ECEs. Initially, the union and myself had discussed, Mildred particularly, Mildred and I had discussed trying to reclass all 4. I received paperwork for 2 of the 4 in terms of the desk audit and reclassification. So the process that I try to set up is I have the employee submit like a questionnaire and tell me about what it is they're doing, with the criteria being that there should be 2 years of an accretion of duties so that I can evaluate it. And then I get all the information and all the data, and then I set up an interview, and then I interview the person, and the union rep is there. And then after the interview, and it could be 2 interviews depending on how much information, but I went through that entire process with 2 of the 4 employees. 1 employee opted out altogether, and Ms. Wilson has not submitted any documentation. So technically, I haven't denied anyone anything. I just haven't received anything to make an informed recommendation. The union's position, as you heard, is Ms. Wilson doesn't have to submit the paperwork. The commission, according to the rule, should reclassify the other 2 employees because they are in the same class. So no, and I've said this before, just for the consideration for the commission, and I'm repeating myself, but just because you weren't here when this came up initially. The only, the 2 points that I would advise against, respectfully to Mildred, against voting for this and reclassing the other 2, is that we have reclassed other employees. And there's that consideration, because if we've reclassed other employees and you take the strictest interpretation that the union has presented, we may then be reclassing other employees who don't do the work. And I think given the budgetary situation with the district, we don't want to put the district in a situation where you just reclassed a bunch of other employees who weren't doing the work. And I think fundamentally what it boils down to is any employee doing additional work that would meet the criteria in order for us to justify reclassing them and into another class for more money. So there is a budgetary component to this, which I just want everyone to consider. But with that, I'm just trying to catch you up. If there's any other questions about the history, I can provide that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commission? Yes, Ms. Goldstein.
I do have some questions, but I just want to add one detail that may not be clear because Commissioner Carter really wasn't here during all this. When the original desk audits were being done for the two who, did request it, my recollection is that our executive director reached out to the supervisor for these roles. And what he received from her was feedback that not everybody actually was doing the same work, which is what put a question into our heads here at the commission about, do we need to look more closely? Because what we know is, for things that are distributed at different schools, sometimes we get scope creep one way and sometimes we get it the other way. And the hope had been that because we were doing a class and comp study, that this position would be looked at. And remind me, this was looked at in phase 1, right? This was a phase 1?
Yes, and someone from EHA interviewed Ms. Wilson.
Right. What I don't know, and maybe you do, is the thought was, we'd go through the class and comp study, we'd get the interviews, we'd get some real clarity on, was there scope creep in different ways in this position, and, should we deal with that accordingly, or was everybody doing the same work, or, what was happening? So, I would say that, the PC did not arbitrarily decide not to engage, that rule that said if 2 in the class, are doing it, everybody should be moved up. There's sort of an unspoken in that sort of assumes everybody's doing the same work. And we had enough feedback to suggest that maybe not everybody was doing the same work and that it bore further investigation. I guess my question is, what did we learn from phase 1? Is everybody doing the same work or no?
Phase 1 said no, that they're slightly different.
Different
enough to be, yeah,
meaningful?
that's correct.
All right. So if that's really the case, because we are expecting, a report, a finalized report soon, right? I would actually like to see the finalized report and the recommendations around this before acting, because that question, came up so early on. So that's what I know about this.
Mr. Carter?
I appreciate that. I have a question from Ms. Scherer. Why didn't these 2 employees submit a request? Do you know?
All right, so there actually may be some backstory that, Mr. Carter, you may remember going back prior to all of this with some concerns with Maria Carradale, who was the supervisor at the time of Ms. Wilson. And I explained that to Charlie actually recently when I told him, but I felt like it was not information that needs to be said in this type of forum. But I want to state that when we first started talking, it was going to be all 4 of them to go through the reclass together. And then after a conversation that Secretary Castillo had with the supervisor, all of a sudden it changed to it being separate. And that made the other 2 feel not supported because the supervisor was only supporting 2 of the 4. But their job duties are all similar. Now, I have to say this because the classification study, when all of this happened, wasn't involved in this process. We hadn't even started the classification study process yet. And actually, I have the notes right here is because so this is December of 2022. And the last that was stated is Commissioner Roder said that the commission wants to do what is right. He clarified his interpretation of particular merit rule language, may and shall. He analyzed merit rule 3300.4 pertinent to this case and ultimately did not understand the difference between B1 and B2. And then Commissioner Goldstein, you recommended instead a desk audit are the only way to see what a person does or does not do on the job. There should have been more clarity earlier as to whether or not this was a process that could move as a wave. So I'm stating to say that is to try to throw the classification study in this particular case is not fair. A desk audit was supposed to happen and a desk audit never happened. That was supposed to. But with that being said, also in 30.300.1 of the merit rules, where it says the personnel director shall review the duties and responsibilities of positions as necessary to determine their proper classification and shall cause all positions to be reviewed once every 3 years. So it doesn't say in all in this whole section, it doesn't say that all persons have to do or must do the reclass paperwork. Or submit their paperwork.
It does say.
Go ahead.
Okay,
But I just want to say this, but section 3300.1 does say the personnel director shall review the duties and responsibilities of positions as necessary. Isn't this necessary to do his job? It wasn't done. He only looked at the 2 positions, not the whole classification.
okay.
And that was stressed at the December 15th meeting that he would do a desk audit, which was never done.
Okay.
And now we're back here again asking why not?
Thank you, Frank. Let's see how we can get through this. 2:27, we've got an hour, 2 items on the agenda that are very important.
I just have 2 questions.
So I have some comments, but yes, Ms. Goldstein and Mr. Carter, please.
All right, my questions actually are for our executive director. My recollection is that you actually reached out on multiple occasions to try to do a desk audit and were unable to do it. Can you tell us why?
I have 8 emails requesting paperwork and engagement and still no response.
And this was to both the ECE personnel who, there were 4 people. 2 people submitted paperwork, 2 people didn't.
No.
Did you request desk audits of both of the folks who did not submit paperwork or no?
I requested paperwork of everyone. As far as Ms. Wilson specifically, there are at least 8, if not 9. I can give you the exact number.
All right, so what I want to make clear is let's not use the passive voice that says a desk audit was not done. The employee declined
No,
desk audits.
that's not true.
That's what I'm hearing.
I'm sorry. The only thing I was CC'd on were the 2 interview dates for the other 2 that actually went through the process of the reclass. But I was not CC'd, nor did Ms. Wilson receive any notification for a desk audit. So the desk audit was told to happen in December 15th meeting, and there was no communication after that regarding a desk audit for her or the other person in the classification.
So to settle this question, is this correspondence something that you can share with the union? So we're at least clear factually on what happened?
I think factually everyone was copied. I guess to define a desk audit, it's not done in the ether. There actually has to be participation from the employee. There's no way to do a desk audit without paperwork, without the employee engaging, and the employee has refused to engage and submit anything. So I don't know how you do a desk audit if you can't have questions answered. And, again, respectfully, the Ed Code also says that the commission charges the executive director with the work and how to do it. The only way I know how to investigate something is to actually interact with the employee. If I give a form to the employee, it is up to the employee to then say, okay, here is the form and let's set up a meeting. The employee has not submitted anything and frankly refuses to submit anything. So as far as saying there's no desk audit done, how is it done when the employee chooses to not do anything?
Okay,
So-
so I think we understand the issue of the desk audit and it needs to be resolved. But I think that there are two separate and distinct issues going on here that really do need to be resolved. And the one that really needs to be resolved is the interpretation of our rule 3300.4, the entire rule. Because as I understand it, the union's position on this and Ms. Wilson's position on this is that 3300.4 B2 says that the reclassification is automatic. If we have reclassified two positions, two employees in a position, then we have to reclassify the entire classification, all the employees in that classification. So that seems like a threshold question that we as a commission need to answer. If the answer is agreement with the union, then we don't have to do a desk audit. We don't have to do anything. She gets reclassified. But if the answer is no, that's not how we interpret it, then we can have a fuller, yet again, discussion about desk audits and reclassification requests and all of that. But I think we have to answer that first question first. Is it automatic or is it not automatic? I don't know if there's comments. I mean, if you disagree with the way I'm approaching it, feel free to say so. I have some strong opinions about the interpretation of 30.300.4, but and which I will share with everybody. But if there's comments about process, we should hear them.
I do have a few questions that probably can't be answered in this one meeting. But I'll ask our director one, maybe can help with this. If the reclass were to be automatic and these other two people were to be reclassed, does that mean that they are now required to be able to do these new duties? Or does that just mean, so can the supervisor demand of them the new tasks or the increased workload that these other two that you've done an audit on? Can these two new employees, are they now required to meet those requirements as well?
Yes. So now so the simple answer is if the decision is for the commission to agree with the union and there's an automatic reclassification, those two employees now would be held to the duties of the new classification. So they would have to complete the duties in that new classification.
And one last question. I don't know if you can even answer this. Can you summarize for me why it's taken so long for the commission to come to this decision? I don't know if the commissioners can answer. It's been 2 years. Did I hear that right? It's been.
Well, I
for 2
can
years?
try to
Could you-
summarize, and
you
at
could
least in my opinion, that I think the biggest reason to me is we have not really decided this automatic versus not automatic decision. I think that prior to you, this current tenure on the commission, the three commissioners were, I would say, leaning toward the idea that it wasn't automatic. And we were trying to get go the desk audit route, trying to get our executive director and then the employee to go through the steps that would be required of a desk audit. And you've heard about the various kind of back and forth about, did you do it? Did you comply? Did you cooperate? Did you not? But I think that's the reason why it's taken so long. And I am very appreciative of Ms. Scher for bringing this up at a meeting so that we can actually fully discuss the interpretation of this provision and decide once and for all, is it automatic or is it not automatic? But that's, I think, the reason. Maybe Commissioner Goldstein and Mr. Castillo have some other thoughts, but
I guess I would add that there was that question for sure. We knew the class and comp study was going to start, right? When did the class and comp actually start? It start?
It started last year, March of 23, I
Okay,
believe.
right.
Maybe sooner, but right around. then.
So we knew the class and comp was imminent, and one of the things we had talked about just as a commission writ large was, did we just need to hold off on reclasses to let the class and comp, do its work, get the data, from the analysis that did. And at that time, our expectation was the class and comp was going to be wound up by November of 2023. And I think that has also contributed to the delay.
yeah, I think that's true. Okay. So my suggestion would be, well, let me give you my thoughts. I expressed them, and Ms. Scher, I think in her notes, captured maybe with a slight exception of one item, my thoughts on the interpretation of 30.300.4. But from the outset, I think that both Frank and Mildred and Jocelyn are aware that I respect wholeheartedly the views of the union, of BCCE, of Local 21, in their coming to the commission and expressing what their thoughts are about a particular issue. And I try to listen to those very carefully. And I think in most instances, I end up ultimately probably agreeing with most of the positions that are set forth. But I have to respectfully on this one, very strongly say that is not my interpretation of the rule. So first off, just and Mildred and Frank, to their credit, were very upfront about it. We can dismiss the idea of being contrary to the Ed Code, because the Ed Code clearly says may, and therefore it's entirely discretionary on the part of the commission. There is so there's no Ed Code violation. I think that's something that we can set aside, in my opinion. So as to our rules, I think the first thing that we have to do, in my opinion, is read the entire rule, especially 30.300.4 in its totality. And again, respectfully, I think BCCE and Ms. Wilson are ignoring the first part, A, of the rule, which I think applies in all circumstances. And it's the same rule that's in the Ed Code. And that is for an employee to be reclassified upward with his or her position, the reclassification must have been occasioned by a gradual accretion of duties and not by a sudden change resulting from reorganization or duty changes by the board. So the overriding, in my opinion, the overriding basis for a reclassification of any employee or any position is the gradual accretion of duties. How do we know that? We know it because both our rules and the Ed Code, and here there's the slightest discrepancy because our rules are old. The Ed Code requires that for either of these two sections to apply, there has to be, the employee had to have been in the job for at least 2 years. 2 years in the Ed Code, 3 years in our rules, but we have to comply with the Ed Code. So you had to have been in your position doing these duties for at least 2 years. Why? Because that's the gradual accretion of those duties. If if you have not been in that position, you haven't been performing those duties for 2 years. And then frankly, it probably has to be an not open, but an examination to determine whether you're the best qualified candidate or not for the job. So that's the gradual accretion of duties. In addition, specifically regarding B1 and B2, it talks about positions. B2 says when a portion of the positions in a class. So clearly, positions is a subset of class. Position, it's a separate and smaller group of employees than the entire class. It's positions. So when a portion of the positions in a class are reclassified upward, those incumbents with 3 or more years of service in one or more of the positions being reclassified shall be reclassified with their positions. And what we have been told, and frankly, we don't know if it's correct or not, but what we have been told is that the positions being performed by the 2 employees, including Ms. Wilson, who weren't reclassified, are different. Their duties are different from the 2 that were reclassified. And we have said from the get-go that if Ms. Wilson, and at one time she actually said at one of our meetings, I recall distinctly, that all the employees are doing the same work. And I would say that's great. And if she is performing, and I don't even think it has to be identical work, it just needs to be substantially similar work as the 2 who were reclassified, then I would not hesitate for a minute in reclassifying Ms. Wilson. But it's not automatic. And then finally, I had 2 things. One is that if you read the B2 in the same way that the union reads B2, it basically would say that if you reclassify a portion of the positions in a class, you reclassify everybody in the class. And B1 says if you reclassify all the positions in a class, then you reclassify all the positions in a class automatically for those who have been in there 3 years. If that's the case, there's no difference. And this is the one part of the summary that I kind of disagree with the way you summarized it. There would be no difference between B1 and B2. And this is what I didn't say the last time we talked about it. There's a fundamental rule of basically rule interpretation that says you don't interpret one rule which renders a different rule superfluous, unnecessary. And this would make B1 unnecessary if we apply B2 in that same way. And then the last thing I would say is just from a practical, I gave the example last time and, I don't have an answer. And that is, let's just say you have 40 custodians in a class, custodian 1 in a class, and you've got, 6 custodian 1s who work at, let's just say, Cragmont School. And Cragmont School, it's up in the hills, it's got a different topography. Maybe it requires the use of specialized equipment for those custodians. And so those custodians come in and rightfully say, we've been using for the last 2 years this equipment. And we feel that this equipment is more in line with a custodian 2 position and not a custodian 1 position. And let's say the commission agrees with that, okay, we're going to reclassify the custodians in those positions at Cragmont to be custodian 2s. If I'm understanding it correctly, if you would take the union's interpretation of this, all the custodians, the other 34 custodians in all the different schools that don't work with this equipment at all, what gave rise to the reclass, they don't do that work. Nonetheless, they would have to be reclassified as well. And as you correctly point out, I think, Mr. Carter, theoretically, they could be required to work on that equipment too. Which maybe they've never been trained. I mean, that, I'm digressing a little bit, but that's why I don't think that that interpretation is the correct one. It's primarily because this reclassification requires a gradual accretion of duties. And if that's the case, then I would say that what Ms. Wilson would need to do is, and I think if you call it a desk audit or if you call it a reclassification request, they're functionally equivalent. And step one is, what are your duties? Give us a list of your duties, and then we'll analyze it. And first it would go to the executive director for a recommendation, and then it will come to the commission as to whether her duties have changed significantly enough to be reclassified. That, I think, is the proper approach. I'll get off my high horse.
May I say something really quickly? I'm
Yes.
sorry. It won't take long. I just want to point back to when we met in December and referencing to 30.300.4 that you're saying that we should have started with. Back then, when we were talking, we were saying that Ms. Wilson said there was enough information to analyze this request, citing meetings with Ms. Cardillo, Assistant Superintendent of HR, Frank Hernandez, and myself, provided no guidance. She was saying that Ms. Castillo provided no guidance about the process. But I remember back then where we had a meeting where with the superintendent of HR, myself, Ms. Wilson, I think Frank, we all went, and Ms. Cardillo, we went line for line about what are the job duties that Ms. Wilson was doing. And a lot at that time was talking about dealing with deposits and things that they weren't previously doing in their job description, but there had to be some clarity in the duties that they were doing, all of them, at all school ECE, duties that they were doing that are outside of the scope of that job classification. That was the whole point of the reclass. So there was a whole meeting around the job duties. And again, the duties that they're all doing at the preschool level is the same. There isn't one person doing this. I mean, of course, you might have difference in the way that you run your office, but the actual duties and procedures that they have to do at that level, they're all the same. There isn't anything different. And that's one of the reasons why we're fighting so hard, because there shouldn't be a separation. If two are reclassed to admin assistant two, then they all need to be reclassed to an admin assistant two. So I hear you. I understand you. And again, I want to point out that I recall that the classification comps had nothing to do with this, because it was actually said that we were going to move forward with this reclass and not wait for the class and comp. So I don't want us to keep trying to make the class and comp a part of this, because it isn't. And there actually is a whole nother concern with the process with the class and comp, because if you want to go there with the class and comp, they ran through phase 1 and phase 2. We didn't ask consultants to come in and check grammar. That's not what we asked for. That's not what we paid for. But now we've been waiting for the compensation part, and we haven't even received anything. So it's a lot of concerns dealing with the class and comp and how they did that. So to say that they did interview Ms. Wilson and they said that it wasn't changed, I would definitely argue the fact, because I can show proof on the consultant's processes with this whole interview thing. So I would like to keep that separate, and I would just like for us to focus on what, like you stated, what the merit rule state. And if you're even saying that 30.300.4A, because I do have a copy of the paperwork that Margot has done, and it's not different from the other two. So it's just interesting. But you're saying that it can't be broken up. But even, let me say this one last thing, and I know because we have to go because it's 2:49. See, Ms. Goldstein, I am keeping time, but I want to read this real quick because in 14.1.4 in definitions, position, it says a work assignment established by the board in the classified staffing model. And then in 14.1.5, referring to class, a class is any group of positions sufficiently similar in duties, responsibilities, and required minimum qualifications assigned the same job title and salary range. A class may be consistent of a single position. And that's one of the arguments is that in B1 and in B2, it says when a portion of the position in a class, and it gives a definition of what class is. And then in B1, it says when all of the positions in a class are reclassified. And then it gives a definition of what the position is. So I really want us to not be so much about the person, because I really think that's what the problem is here. I think it's the relating personalities to get into the way of the person instead of what the actual merit rule reads and what it states. And even if you're saying that we are skipping A, but it says shall, and that says a lot. And I can read the definition of shall, but I don't think y'all want me to do that. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now it's up to us commissioners to decide at least how to proceed. Mr. Carter.
I have a litany of questions here. I have a ton of questions. I don't know if they need to be addressed in this one meeting. I say we defer. I recommend we defer one more month. I have questions for the union and questions for our director as well that I don't think can be answered here.
Do you want to take a shot just at sort of framing out what the questions are so folks are prepared to, I
So
mean, if
sure,
they can
sure.
answer them,
Well,
great.
sure,
And if they
let's give it a
can't,
try.
they
So,
know what they are.
So, Mr. Coutil, the question to you is, given the desk audit that you did complete on the two that you reclassed, did those duties from your experience show such a specificity to only be required at these locations? Or were your analysis of their accretion, is that something that you would expect to happen at each location? Or is that something that only happens at those locations?
I don't anticipate or factor any of those things that you asked. I only look at the documentation that the employee has provided. And I compare that, a couple things. One, I want the evidence to be, the documentation to be contemporaneous so that it does demonstrate the 2 years, and that the employee, in cooperation with the supervisor, corroborate that this is the work that they were asked to do. And then lastly, I look at the substance of the work that they're being asked to do, and then compare that with the job class. There's no anticipation of other classes or anyone. They're done individually. The employee themselves is the one that's submitting and interacting with me to demonstrate and to give me the evidence that they actually have been doing this for 2 years. So I don't go outside, that's why I ask for the individual desk audit. In this particular case, it was introduced as all four, but when all four employees were asked and they were providing documents, 2 of the 4 employees were providing documents that were saying, look, I was doing this and I was doing that, and you're asking me to do this. But I have to reiterate, I never received anything else from the other 2 employees.
So this is where my discussion will come in. So let's put a pin in the documentation that was received or wasn't received. I get the impression that there may be some mitigating issues that may have prevented these employees from participating in the process. That doesn't mean just because they didn't participate that they should not benefit or they should not have the same sort of inspection or care about their work that they're doing, because they may be working in an environment that they don't feel comfortable to participate. That doesn't mean they're not doing the work. So my question was to you is, there are specific duties that you analyze when you were doing this that shows, oh yeah, this is an accretion, this is not, this is an accretion, this is not. Given those duties that you analyze, whether it's answering more phones, taking on more more children. Were those duties so specific to be just at these locations, or were they duties that an average person would assume that everyone in this class would have probably done this because of the changing of our demographics, the increase in our student body or decrease in our student body? Would those duties, so then my next question is, if you don't know offhand, I'd ask for a copy of the desk audit. I don't know if that's something you can, I would ask for a copy of that will be the next question, which is giving you an idea of what the framework of my questions would be, but if you could.
Yeah, no, I can answer all of that.
Okay.
There's an incredible amount of volume of documentation on this, so there's no shortage of answers for you. Yes, so to your first question in regards to the approach of, well, if two of these employees in this class for this department are doing it, can one conclude that perhaps the other two are doing it? Yes, that again, that's how we started. And that's the question I posed for the supervisor, which is, well, if this is a need that you have and you have 4 sites, wouldn't one assume that all 4 people are doing the work? She said no. However, it didn't end there. When she said no, I still approached the employee individually and said, listen, and through email, if you want to give me documentation, and the supervisor is saying no, and your documentation, again, at contemporaneous, and that it's, substantiated with fact. It doesn't matter what the supervisor says at that point, because there could be a situation where the supervisor is making them do things and they say, no, I don't make them do things. That's happened before. So to rule out that possibility, I've approached the employee no less than 10 times. Can you provide this for me so I can look into this? They've chosen to not respond to me or to not give me any documentation. The other element here is, if I'm going to come to the commission and ask for the use of public funds, I have to have documentation. I can't just go through word of mouth or whatever. So we have approached this from every angle. I have not solely trusted the supervisor. I have not solely trusted I am going with evidence. And again, if Margot Wilson was to supply me evidence tomorrow, then we'd be having a different conversation. But there's been nothing.
So back to the question, what duties did you identify that were an accretion on these other 2 positions? And would a reasonable person see that those duties would also be required at the other locations? Put a pin in the paperwork received or not received from the employees, and let's put a pin in the supervisor's opinion. You've seen 2, which is half of that class. And they've clearly demonstrated to you that they have an accretion of duties. So are those duties reasonable to assume the other 2 would be completing those duties? Or are they far out of the realm because the campus is so far, because whatever?
Before you answer that, Mr. Castillo, I think that's an excellent question. I think that's an important and fundamental question. Mr. Castillo, I think, has an answer for it right now.
I don't know if you.
But maybe it's best to think about it a little bit more, review the documentation. And as I'm always doing, it's 3:00 now. We have to have a public hearing on our budget, or else we're not going to have a budget. I think that a motion would be in order at this point. It seems obvious to me we're not going to resolve this today. To defer this to the next meeting, put it over. Mr. Castillo, I think, understands Commissioner Carter's very, important question. And deserves to have, we all deserve to have an answer to that question. But I think it's going to have to wait to another meeting.
I suggested we defer.
Yeah.
I move we defer this to the next meeting.
I'll second.
Yeah, and I agree. We wanted to get it done, but we want to get all the information. So this item will be deferred until the next meeting, and in particular with an answer to Mr. Carter's question. Okay. Thank you, Mildred. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, this has always confused me a little tad about these public hearings. So we will open the public hearing on the Personnel Commission budget for 2024-2025. That start on page 60, 68 and 69. This is for our second hearing, our hopefully final determination of the budget. I think it'd be best to start with Mr. Castillo. If we can all recall that at the last meeting, Pauline Follansby and Emily Mayer came in with some, two really, suggestions. One suggestion, I think that Mr. Castillo and his staff had already incorporated in the budget, and a second that he was going to look at. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Castillo, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
Thank you, Chairman Roder. If you'll notice, there are just 3 highlighted areas. I can keep it pretty short. I think that we are adopting the suggested changes from Pauline Follansby's office, which are to cut the overtime in half. So that went from 4,000 to 2,000. And to cut the travel in half. So that has gone from 12,000 to 6,000. The other highlighted area, which is an increase of 8,000, is work that we have taken on from Human Resources. So that's additive, but it's understood that we're going to be taking on this work now. So that's it. Those changes we've accepted and we've proposed for the final budget. And if you have any questions, just please ask.
So maybe given that this is a public hearing, it's appropriate to hear from the public. We have Ms. Follansby remotely in attendance, and she has her hand up. So please go ahead, Ms. Follansby. I think you are muted. Sarah, is there any reason why she's not unmuted? Pauline, could you unmute yourself and make your presentation, please?
So hi, I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. I've
Okay,
just been able to. So, and I was trying to get on video. I apologize. I was trying for a while. So, I just have one comment on the budget that was the revised budget. So the budget that was brought forward at the previous meeting totaled 802,874. We requested the hourly overtime to be reduced by 50%. And the travel and conferences by 50%. So I was expecting to see a reduction of $2,000 of the overtime and a reduction of $4,000 for travel and conferences. So that would be a reduction of $6,000. The $8,000 was already in the draft that we got at the last meeting. And what I'm seeing, it went from 802,000. Not the amount that I was expecting it to be reduced by. It's now 801,000. And that's because the hourly budget was reduced by the $2,000. Travel and conferences went from 8,000, which was in the original budget, to 6,000. That's a reduction of 2,000. However, equipment that was 5,000 in the last budget is now 8,000. So the net savings in this version of the budget is $1,000 and not the amount that we had talked about, which would have been approximately 6,000. So I appreciate the $1,000, but for transparency, this budget is only $1,000 less than the draft that we got at the last meeting. So we are facing a budget shortfall. We came to some agreement in terms of next steps. I'm not seeing it in this version of the budget. And I just want to put everybody on notice that the governor's budget is coming out in a couple of days. And from all indications, we think it's not gonna be better than the January budget. So that will require even more of a reduction in everybody's budget. And we're just hoping that the Personnel Commission will play their part in terms of additional budget reductions as needed. So there is $1,000, which we appreciate. We were expecting 6,000, but I think it was 4 and 2, 6, but then there was an increase of $3,000 in equipment, which wasn't in the last budget. That's my public comment.
Okay, thank you, Assistant Superintendent. Let me just see if I understand this. I'm looking at the column, so I'm looking at page 69. I don't have what was presented at the last meeting, and maybe that makes a difference. But I'm looking at the 23-24 column, and I'm looking at first off, travel and conference.
So is it over the 24-25 budget that we're focusing on?
Yeah, I know, but if the idea is to reduce our 24-25 budget by half from travel conference, professional development, it looks to me like that was done. It was 12,000 in 23-24, went down to 6,000 in 24-25. And then let me just say the second part, because I didn't quite get this. Under equipment, what I'm looking at, just the row right above it, under equipment, 23-24 says 8,000 and 24-25 says 8,000. So I don't see an increase in equipment between our current year, 23-24, and 24-25. So
I'm sorry, I think there's a disconnect. What I was proposing was a reduction to what was of the 24-25 budget that was originally presented. So I was hoping that we would have seen a reduction, not to 6,000, but of the 8 that was presented, that would have been further reduced by another 2.
May
Can
I
I
ask
offer- Sorry.
I have a question that I'm hoping Assistant Superintendent can speak to. When I look at these documents, I actually go back to the old documents of what was approved prior. And I see some numbers in the 23-24 column that actually are not what was approved. And I want to ask about these and understand why they're represented differently in this document in front of me. So I am looking first at other supplies, commission fees, reimbursements, which is shown in this document as 14,600. But when you look in other documents that were approved at the end of last year, that number was 11,000.
So again, I'm not following you. What are you looking at?
I am looking at the line item, other supplies, commission fees, reimbursements. In 23-24, this number actually was 30,200. The number I see is 14,600. So, somehow this number is off from
So it's
what was approved prior.
Right. So 4350 is one account number. If there's an additional expense in that line item, it may have been transferred from another line item. I have not done a detailed analysis, but I know one of the major differences is that your legal bills, even though it's scored to your budget, it's paid for by the superintendent. So that's a $10,000 difference.
All right, this
So-
is legal though. This is other supplies, or are you saying because it's commission fees? Is that what makes?
It is when there are requests from certain line items, as long as it's not exceeding the budget, there may be shifts in the line items. This budget is not always exactly on point in terms of actuals, but our control number is to ensure that it's not over the additional budget. So it will be disingenuous just to go through one line item without looking at the entire budget in total.
So related to that then, might be the equipment line item, which was also confusing to me. In the budget we have in front of us, 23-24 is represented as 8,000. Yet, the number I actually saw for 23-24 was 19,246. It was a much bigger number.
Where are you, what number, where are you seeing those numbers, Heidi?
All right, so I'm looking at the line item called equipment.
Right, but where are you seeing the 19,000?
From a prior year's budget document. It's not on this document at all. I went back to understand the finalized budget for 23-24, you know, after we did it last year, to see, you know, just what number did we use? And, you know, was it a match? You know, just my diligence. And there was a very different number in that cell.
Well,
What
I,
I'm looking at is
Hold-
what the
hold on one
Personnel
second.
Commission,
hold on one second.
Um,
Hold on one second, please. I'm looking at what was provided to me as what we adopted in fiscal year 23-24 as our budget, and it shows equipment 8,000,
right,
other supplies 14,600.
correct. That's what
So
I'm looking
You're
at.
looking in this package.
No, I'm
Yes.
looking at a year ago.
Are you?
Attachment C
Have
is
the-
what Izzy and myself are looking at.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think,
I knew I should have brought the other stuff with me. Hang on.
I think Mr. Castillo
Mhm.
has a comment.
All
here.
right.
I might be able to shed some light to maybe inform the conversation a little better. And looking at this, I believe Ms. Follansby is asked, I think the expectation was for us to do half of the half we had proposed. Last time we had proposed cuts to the equipment budget. But if I heard Ms. Follansby and Ms. Mayor last time, they said, no, the cuts we want are to overtime and to travel. So we did that. But in listening to Ms. Follansby, I think what her expectation, and maybe she didn't make this clear, I certainly didn't hear it, that in addition to the proposed cut that I had proposed to the commission for the equipment, in addition to that, the cuts to the overtime and the cut to the, so that's what I'm hearing you say, Pauline. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so what I'm looking at is assuming 24-25 is a zero-sum game or zero-based budgeting. When I looked at those numbers, I was expecting what you had proposed for 24-25 to be reduced by the 50%, not the prior year. You came with a budget for 24-25 that was derived based on your internal documentation. When I looked at that, I was asking for those numbers to be reduced further down and not for another bucket to be increased. So overall, I mean, when you look at year over year, your budget has gone from $747,000 to $802. So there's an overall increase. And when I looked at the various sections, like where the increases are, I would expect there to be a step-on column increase in salaries. So there's an 8% increase from 24-25 in salaries. There was a reduction in the just in buckets overall, but then we have a 14% increase in professional consulting. So what I was asking for was a reduction from your 802,000 that you presented at the last minute to be reduced by $6,000. Because I'm not starting from 23, 24, I'm starting with the budget that you originally proposed to us.
And let me just say, Pauline, that I did not understand it either that way. I thought that what you and Emily were suggesting to us, which I thought was quite reasonable, is reduce the expenditures from 23, 24 amount for those two line items by 50%. So I have to say, I understood it the exact same way as Mr. Castillo did, and I don't know about the other commissioners.
I guess my question is, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right now. The number that you're looking to see from us is 796,874. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I think, Izzy, you even said there were other areas that that was it'll be 798,874 was what would be what? I mean, from what you had proposed before to reduce that by 4,000, but there are other areas that, Izzy, you said, and even if you can't get it from those line items, to try other line items. So I wasn't expecting an increase in equipment. I was looking for reductions, and bearing in mind that there were the phones that you now have to pay for, and there is the professional screening, so that's another 10,000. So there is an increase from 23, 24. So just to reduce those two line items from 23, 24 wouldn't really give us anything extra in terms of the bottom line. So I am looking at the bottom line.
So I have a question about equipment, just from our last conversation, which was, I think what we had talked about last time was you had said that because the equipment budget for this year, 23, 24, still has money in it, you were planning to spend that,
Yes.
to update things that we needed to update.
Yes.
So is that a line item we have some flexibility in?
Well, I mean, it's still yet to be determined how much we need to spend. What I do know is that we have a bunch of computers that don't work. And, if we're gonna stay remote and keep things going the way they're going, we need to have computers that work. And that includes our staff. That includes the testing computers. That includes, computers if somebody was to come in and use them. And I haven't spent that yet. So, again, I kept it flat. I didn't increase it.
I mean, it looks to me like we have 14K in equipment unspent. When I look at the April, spending to April document that was provided to us.
Aaron's gonna shed light on this, but yes,
Okay.
please. Yeah.
So that 1,400 was a result of the issues that were there from the budget getting uploaded a little later in the year. So the budget analyst dumped the funds into that account or that budget line. It's not that we had that much money to spend from there. It's just like everything's coming out of that one line because if they were catching up from, how late it was processed in the year.
All right, so you're saying that this entry of, the original revised budget that shows for equipment in this April run is 19,000 and change. You're saying that is sort of reflective of this just being a holding category.
And then also our budget would have gone down by $8,000 if it weren't for the fact that we're assuming now this responsibility again for the pre-employment physicals. That's something that's already being spent though. Like it's already money that's coming out of the district's budget through HR. So now it's just they're asking it to be funneled to the PC. This is a request that HR made. So they're already, spending this money. This money is already getting spent. The district pays for it HR pays for it. And they asked us to assume the responsibility for the pre-employment physicals. So it's not a new expense that we're making. It's just now something like bills that the PC is gonna have to process now.
Mm.
However, this money is already being spent by HR.
Mhm.
So
I-
if
I
that
guess-
8,000 weren't there, our budget would have gone down a little more.
I guess the
Drastically.
question that I have is when I look at this April, expenses to date. I see a few things. I see that the salaries and benefits doesn't include the BARA money, which is why they all read as negative. I assume that they're balanced when you put the BARA in it. So, I've kind of ignored all salary and benefits for that reason, and I'm assuming they're balanced. So what I'm looking at is other amounts that I'm sort of wondering what happens to those amounts if they're not spent? And, or do you plan to spend them, is one question. And then the other is, against the requests that are being made to come in at 796, can some of this be a credit towards that?
I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that because when we submit these requests for the expenditure, it goes through this office. So sometimes we get an answer, in a couple months, and sometimes we don't hear anything for months. So we're not in control of that expenditure, although technically we make the request.
Well, maybe I'm asking the wrong person. Maybe I should be asking Pauline
Yeah.
that question.
That's,
And Pauline, I appreciate that you don't have our expenses to date, April 23rd memorized. Okay, but net on this thing, I see about $58,000 worth of stuff that, right now looks like is not spent. Trending, based on what I saw from February run, last time we looked at this, I can expect this amount probably to go down another $20,000. So I think there is probably somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 that the commission won't spend this year that will go back into your pool. So if we're really just trying to make a $6,000 change here, can we just get credit for that? And
So can we, I have another question, Heidi. Can we trend our budgets based on what you're spending in the prior year? So if you're leaving $30,000 on the table, why isn't the budget less than $30,000? So
well, I think it was an extraordinary year last year because we knew we were doing the class and comp. That would be my,
we paid for the class and comp though. I mean, we had to pay the consultant. It didn't come from your budget.
Mhm.
It was a district's budget.
Okay, all right, then it's not that. I guess the thing I need to understand, and I don't understand this about district budgeting. I know sometimes everybody goes through the great encumbering rush, in the beginning of, and I have no idea what the commission looks like for that. I was just kind of trending between February and April, how things were.
So I'll explain. Well, what I've noticed is that we had a significant increase in the budget for recruiting and advertising from 22-23 to 23-24. Same thing for applications and copying, and testing went down somewhat. So I appreciate the need for the increased budget for efficiencies or for us getting people hired quicker. But the thing that we need to know is that within the district, we have cutoff periods for ordering things. And we've been sending out emails. At the end of April, we're expecting everybody to have ordered whatever they needed for the year. So there's not going to be an opportunity to use this budget. Even if it's unspent now, it will be falling to the bottom line unless you have it already in a purchase order. It's already encumbered. So for all intents and purposes, your actuals are going to look pretty much the way they look now in your 4,000s and 5,000s. And your salaries are the only thing that we'll be paying for going forward. So so we send memos out district-wide in terms of the last date for budget transfers and the last date to actually spend or at least requests, have POs requesting items like for your equipment and so on. And that day, that's actually today, I think. Or was it? Yes, it may have been on Friday. So the district at this point takes a position, well, you're not gonna be spending this amount. This is across the board, everybody's budget. We're not gonna leave it
Mhm.
there and have it fall to the bottom line because that's not gonna do us any good when we close the books. So for all intents and purposes, you've already spent your 4,000s and your 5,000s. And barring unusual expenses, that should be used as a trend to set your budgets for the upcoming year, unless you know you have planned unusual expenses. And Charlie did say he has to do equipment, but right now it looks like you have 13,000 left in that line item. Whether it's the correct line item or not, but right now I'm looking at an unspent balance of 45,000 on the last report I have. I don't have the most recent one.
Pauline,
Chances are that's gonna fall to the bottom.
Pauline, I think Mr. Carter may have a comment, but I just want to know kind of, as I understood it, where we are. Is where we are that the budget that is in the agenda for 24-25 that's being proposed, bottom line is 801,864.66.
I
And
thought it was 874.66.
874, yeah, maybe I read that wrong.
No.
874, that's right. And what you are looking for, is this correct? Is a budget of 798,894. Is that the number you gave us?
870, yes. I mean, I was expecting the number that was proposed to be reduced even
Right,
further.
but what is that number? Is the number?
That's it, the 2,000 and I mean, at a minimum.
Right, no, I'm bottom line.
Bottom line, I'm thinking 798, but that's based on just the request for 50% reduction in what
Right.
was proposed for overtime and for travel and
I
conferences.
understand your positions. I just want to know what the numbers are.
Well, my position varies, is it depending on what method you're using for budgeting. If you're using past trends, it looks like you're about to leave $30,000 on the table.
No, we've never used past trends. I mean, I can tell you why, but we've never used past trends.
But then I have to, as the CBO, because if it's not spent, it goes back to the bottom line and I have to explain that as a variance.
But can I understand the bottom line, though? Is your bottom line 798,894?
That's what I would like to see, barring unusual news from the governor.
Right. So we're $2,000 apart, basically,
Three.
in round numbers.
You're more than that, you're 3.
3?
You're at 7, you're
7,
801 versus 798.
well, 799,
I think it's closer to 5.
Yeah, it's $3,000 difference, isn't it?
3,000, okay.
As a good faith presentation, that's what I would
Okay,
expect.
did you have a question?
I do have a
Mr. Carter?
question in here. So budgeting isn't necessarily my strong suit, but why do we take on this $8,000 request, this $8,000 testing from HR?
Yeah.
Is that,
let's not do it.
is that something and so but part one of the question, you guys probably anticipate part two. What's the complexity of giving it back? Is it complex? Could you speak to that?
Well, it becomes an $8,000 football for somebody.
So this was, it's a part of the onboarding process that HR believes belongs to the Personnel Commission because it's a pre-employment physical. So we used to manage that budget at some point. In the past, one of our directors felt like it didn't belong to the Personnel Commission, so we gave it to HR. And they requested that we take it back because, they were under the belief that it does belong to the Personnel Commission. And, we agreed to work with them and let them know that we are willing to take it on. Again, this is money that's already being spent every year by the district. It's just now gonna be billed to Personnel Commission.
So just for clarity, for my clarity here, and correct me if I'm wrong. we haven't taken on responsibility because it's a fiscal year coming up.
Not yet, no.
And if we choose not to, then our budget would fall below the requested amount by the district.
Yes.
So at the next meeting, you guys maybe see the next one, I may move to not accept this if it's not necessary. And our budget would be acceptable from the district's perspective and from ours as well. Am I mistaken with that? Or because we need to, not we need to, but in the spirit of participating in this budget cut for the district, we're all going to feel a little bit of the pain. And so I would like to see, at least on paper, that we do our best to participate in this. And from us going back and forth over a few $1,000s, I think we did ourselves a disservice by taking on this extra expenditure. And so I think that's something we should look at. So we could at least appear on paper to do our part.
So you're asking, can HR take back the pre-employment physical? screening?
I'm saying, can the commission refuse to accept it? Not take it back because we don't have it. Refuse to accept it as an additional expenditure.
Vice Chair Carter, Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinosa is on, but, oh, sorry.
Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinosa has her hand up, but before you take her question, I think we're trying, honestly, we're trying to be team players. We're trying to work with the district, and yeah, and that's where we find ourselves. It is more work for us though, but we approached it from the spirit of, HR helps us, we help HR, it's a good thing. But in terms of money, you are correct, it's $8,000. That's in it.
Would also put if I'm not mistaken, would also maybe put a burden on the overtime category that we're reducing?
Possibly.
Good. Is that possible? Okay.
Possibly.
So I did see, yes, Assistant Superintendent Samantha Tobias Espinoza has her hand up. And also we need to bid farewell at this meeting to Commissioner Goldstein. So Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinoza, please go ahead.
I'm fine with whatever agreement you guys decide to make regarding that in terms of the pre-employment piece. What I would say is it wouldn't change what Pauline has expressed, which is reducing both by 50%, both the overtime as well as the travel and conferences piece of the pie. Regardless of that 8,000, it would just be that 8,000 wouldn't be in there, but in your budget, but you would still need to reduce the those two budgets by 50% based on our request, which is what we're doing across the board in all of our departments, is reducing that 50%. So to me, the 8,000 for the pre-employment is its own factor, going back and forth, and we shouldn't be talking simply about a bottom line number, but more of what is the difference between the two in terms of we're looking at a 50% to those things, because they are not equal. That 8,000 would still need to get spent by the district, and it wouldn't help our budget. It would be like the Personnel Commission is not contributing, in fact. And I would not think that that was the message that you would want to send.
Well, can I make a suggestion? Because I am sort of looking at the bottom line, and I hope that we can approve a budget at this meeting. What if, taking into account both the unspent amounts for various line items that we've talked about, that Commissioner Goldstein and Pauline Follansbee suggested, as well as some of the suggestions which I frankly did not understand to be the suggestions that Pauline and Emily had made. But again, looking at the bottom line, what if we were to reduce the equipment budget by $500? Because we don't actually know that that equipment is going to be spent. Reducing that by 500, reducing the travel, conference, and professional development by an additional 500, which could be an issue, but you know, travel is something that can be managed, and so can conferences. And I would suggest we also haven't really, in terms of legal counsel, I don't think we've spent the $10,000 any of the years that I've been on the commission. So we reduce that by $1,000 to make it 9,000. Again, that's something that can be managed. And then recruiting and advertising by an additional 500, applications and announcements by an additional 500, and that equals $3,000, which, as I understand it, is the bottom line that Pauline is looking for. And I agree that at the last meeting, I said, well, maybe there are some other line items that we could take a look at and perhaps reduce. So that's kind of what I tried to do here, just so that we can basically adopt a budget without, and I do feel, I think I agree with what Mr. Castillo said before, that, and also Aaron, that it does seem like the pre-employment screening and physicals are closely enough related to the commissions. We do half of that already. This is doing another portion of it. So I guess I'm more inclined to reduce 4 line items a little bit than take the whole 8,000 out of the pre-employment physical part of it. But yeah, Mr. Castillo.
I might make one small amendment to your proposal. So the travel, conference, professional development, the travel portion of that is pretty small because we already know we're only going to go to one conference. Aaron and I specifically, we are signing up for remote training. And this year in particular, we need to do, because we have the class and comp, Aaron and I are getting training on how we can take on this moving forward in terms of classification study and stuff. So we want to spend that money on that type of training. It's actually not traveling outside, but we're being pretty aggressive about getting that training for us and for our team. So I'm afraid of taking anything out of the travel, conference, professional development area right now. Even the $500, that's one training for one of us. I would maybe propose, and I'm looking at Aaron, but the 500 out of equipment. Why don't we take 1,000 out of the equipment? And I'm careful in saying this because we don't have the equipment yet. And again, this equipment, some of our laptops aren't working. Some of the laptops that we use for testing aren't working. So this is it's kind of a big deal. However, if I have to choose with sharing a computer or getting trained, I'm going to pick getting trained. Because we're no use to you if we're not like on top of our game, right? That said, the only amendment I would add, Chairman Roeder, is instead of taking the 500 out of professional development, if we can make equipment 1,000, which is the
Right.
line right above it. So
Right.
it would be
That's
7.
what you just said. Yeah.
That meets what Mrs. Follansby is asking for.
That seems reasonable to me if Mr. Carter feels that way too.
Yeah, I'm really gonna defer to Charlie on this because you are in the department, you actually know this is just numbers to me, equipment. I don't know what that means, 1 computer or 20. I don't know what that means in the terms of workload. So I'm really gonna defer to you. If you suggest it, then I support it.
It's about 6. 6.
Okay. Again, public hearing, don't see anybody with their hands up. No. All right, well then I would make the motion and correct me, Mr. Castillo or Aaron, if I'm wrong about this, that we take the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget that's on page 69, with the exception that we change other supplies, commissioners, no, I'm sorry, that we change equipment from $8,000 to $7,000. In addition, we change legal counsel from $10,000 to $1,000. We,
Wait, no, 9,000.
I'm sorry, I said 1,000 to 9,000. We reduce it by 1,000. We change recruiting and advertising, if I'm not mistaken, from 15,000 to 14,500. And applications, announcements, and copying from 13,814 to 13,314. And that is an overall reduction of $3,000 from the proposed budget, which I think hopefully will satisfy the district in terms of their comments. That's my motion.
I second.
Okay, I never know if you have to close the public hearing before you vote, or do you keep the public hearing open and vote?
I think we close.
I think close the public hearing. Okay, so the
Yes.
public hearing is now declared closed. We have the motion on the table that I think Charlie, Aaron, and Sarah have gotten. I made that motion. We have a second on that motion from Mr. Carter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. And as stated previously, Commissioner Goldstein had to leave. So she is absent. Phew. All right, let's see. I don't know that I can find my agenda and all these pieces of paper that I have here.
Chairman Rhoda, we have a closed session.
We have a closed session, is right, regarding a disciplinary matter. So that is what we will take up at this point. It's slated for 30 minutes. My strong feeling is it's not going to be nearly that long, probably 15 at the most. And we will be back after that. Thank you. All right, Sarah, we recording? Okay, the Personnel Commission will reconvene after closed session. The report is that we received an update on the disciplinary matter and no action needed to be taken. So now we'll have our second opportunity for public comment. Is there, let's see. We have some people still on remote. I don't see any hands up. If there's anyone who's on remote who wishes to make a final public comment, this would be the time to do that. Don't see any hands going up. Sarah, do you see anything? No? Okay. So that will, and there's nobody in the room, so that will close the public comment. And now it's next meeting, is it? Okay, our next meeting is May 24th. That's a Friday, from 4:30 to 7:30, and that's here in the boardroom. And then we're on to adjournment, correct? So there being no other business, the Personnel Commission meeting will be adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.